By October 4, 1939, the German-Soviet partition of Poland was nearly complete. While small pockets of Polish military resistance continued, organized opposition was swiftly diminishing. Both Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union were consolidating their control over their respective occupied zones, and the military phase of the Polish campaign was coming to a definitive end. On this day, attention turned to the implications of the German and Soviet occupations, as well as the evolving geopolitical situation as the world braced for the next steps in the broader conflict. Military events. The end of the Polish campaign. Although the bulk of the Polish army had already been defeated, the Polish Independent Operational Group Polski under General Franciszek Kleeberg continued to hold out in the region around Koch. This group, numbering around 16,000 soldiers, was engaged in one of the last organized military actions of the Polish campaign, the Battle of Koch, which would continue until October 6th. However, even with remarkable resilience, it was clear that the situation was becoming increasingly hopeless for the Polish forces as they faced superior numbers and firepower from both German and Soviet troops. On October 4th, Nazi Germany began to formalize its administrative and military control over the western portion of Poland, while the Soviet Union did the same in the eastern territories. Both regimes quickly moved to suppress any remaining Polish resistance and impose their own political systems. In the German-controlled areas, preparations were already underway for the harsh occupation policies that would come to define the Nazi approach to subjugating the Polish population, including forced labor and the persecution of Jews and Polish elites. Diplomatic and geopolitical developments. A divided Poland and international responses. Diplomatically, October 4th marked an important phase in the solidification of the German-Soviet alliance, which had been formalized through the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact in late August 1939. The secret protocols of the pact, which outlined the partition of Poland, were now fully realized, and both regimes were focused on securing their gains. German and Soviet forces worked in tandem to demarcate their new borders, with both powers coordinating their occupation strategies to ensure that no Polish forces or insurgents could threaten their hold on the country. Internationally, the partition of Poland sent shockwaves through Europe and beyond. Britain and France, which had declared war on Germany on September 3rd in response to the invasion of Poland, faced increasing criticism for their lack of effective military intervention. The so-called Phoney War, a period of inactivity on the Western Front, continued, frustrating Allied citizens and soldiers alike who expected a more aggressive response to Germany's expansionism. In the Americas, the effects of the Panama Conference, which concluded on October 3rd, began to manifest. Latin American countries reiterated their commitment to neutrality and the maintenance of a Pan-American security zone, reflecting the growing concern over the global nature of the conflict. While the United States remained officially neutral, President Franklin D. Roosevelt's administration was closely monitoring the situation in Europe, particularly the rapid German and Soviet territorial expansion. International reactions and media coverage. On October 4, 1939, newspapers across Europe and the world continued to report on the end of the Polish campaign and the consequences of the German-Soviet partition. In Britain, the Times and other major papers featured stories on the dire situation in Poland and the growing public dissatisfaction with the lack of Allied action on the Western Front. Editorials called for a more robust military response and questioned the effectiveness of British and French diplomacy, which had failed to prevent the fall of Poland. In France, a similar mood of frustration and anxiety prevailed. Newspapers like Le Figaro highlighted the tragic fate of Poland and warned of the growing Nazi threat to Western Europe. Many in the French public were beginning to feel that their government's reliance on the Maginot Line and a defensive strategy was insufficient in the face of Germany's aggressive military tactics. German newspapers, tightly controlled by the Nazi regime, celebrated the successful conclusion of the Polish campaign, framing it as a victory for Germany's military prowess and a necessary step in the reorganization of Eastern Europe. Propaganda emphasized the supposed righteousness of the occupation, portraying the Wehrmacht as liberators bringing order to a chaotic region. In the Soviet Union, state media similarly justified the invasion of Poland as a defensive measure, protecting ethnic minorities and preventing the spread of fascism to Eastern Europe. Soviet newspapers reported on the integration of Polish territories into the Soviet Union, promoting the idea that the Red Army had brought peace and stability to the region. Projections. The impact of October 4, 1939, on the future of the war. The events of October 4, 1939, marked the effective end of organized Polish resistance and the full division of Poland between Germany and the Soviet Union. For Poland, this day signaled the beginning of a long and brutal occupation, characterized by repression, forced labor, and the systematic persecution of the Polish people by both Nazi and Soviet forces. Looking ahead, the conclusion of the Polish campaign freed up German and Soviet resources for future military operations. Hitler's ambitions were now turning westward, with plans for an invasion of France and the Low Countries already taking shape. For the Allies, the fall of Poland was a sobering reminder of the threat posed by Nazi Germany, and the pressure to take more decisive action would continue to grow as the war expanded. For the global audience, October 4th was a day that underscored the complexity and scale of the conflict. The occupation of Poland would have profound and far-reaching consequences for the rest of the war, setting the stage for further territorial ambitions and shaping the political and military strategies of all the major powers involved in World War II. The full extent of the conflict was yet to be realized, but the events of this day foreshadowed the darker chapters still to come.